Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be going through the top 20 best-selling fantasy books of all time and seeing which ones I've read and which ones I haven't. I want to apologize for the different setup. I need my laptop in order to do this video, and I'm currently in the process of transferring a ton of files from the laptop to my external hard drive, and I didn't want to interrupt that because it still has an hour left. So I kind of had to finagle my setup in order for me to be able to film this video with my laptop. So I'm sorry if the setup looks weird. Also, I'm literally sitting right in front of a window and the sunlight is just pouring in, so I know it's making everything look super bright. So thank you guys for bearing with me with this really weird situation. But I found this list on moneyinc.com. I found a bunch of websites that had the list of best-selling fantasy books, and some of them I was like, there's no way that's a best-selling fantasy book, and I figured like a money website, a business website would have more accurate data. However, I can't verify how credible this website is, but just based off of the answers as I was scrolling through, I could see how it would be accurate, and it also gave like the actual number of books sold when it talks about the specific series. So seems pretty accurate to me. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the 20 best-selling fantasy books of all time so we can see which ones I've actually read. Coming in at number 20 is the Shannara series by Terry Brooks at 21 million copies. And I actually tried to read the first book in the series, goodness, years and years ago, and I just found it to be like a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. And like I said, it's been a long time, so my memory might be skewed. And I just like couldn't get into the writing style. I just found it a bit amateurish. So I really don't have much experience with the Shannara series other than that. I didn't finish it, nothing like that. And I remember when MTV did put out the TV series for this, and I definitely watched some of it, but I remember it not being very good. I don't think I'll ever go back to reading the Shannara series, even though it is like a very popular classic fantasy series. Alrighty, coming in at number 19, it looks like Artemis Fowl. So I have read the first Artemis Fowl book. This is a middle grade series, and I found like a 4-pack at my used bookstore. So I just bought them thinking that I would really like the series, and I actually didn't love it. I found it to be just okay. I'm just not the target audience for it, even though I can enjoy a good middle grade story. And I've never picked up the next books in the series just because I didn't fall in love with Artemis Fowl. Alrighty, the next one is Roald Dahl, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You know, I've never actually read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and this one has sold 22 million copies. The only Roald Dahl book I've actually read is James and the Giant Peach. I have read a handful of his short stories though. I really do like him as an author. I think he's very unique. But once again, this is a children's book, and I just feel like it might not speak to me like it would have when I was a kid, but maybe I'll get to it at some point. Alrighty, next we have Terry Goodkind, his Sword of Truth series coming in at number 17 at 25 million copies sold. And I actually have read a decent amount of these. I started with Wizard's First Rule, and then I stopped at the Pillars of Creation. I think I was probably in high school when I read these books, and the reason I didn't finish the series is because the books started getting worse and worse and worse. So I stopped at Pillars of Creation. I remember really enjoying this series when I was a teenager. I know that Terry Goodkind has received like a lot of criticism on this series, saying it's just a copycat of a bunch of other series, Wheel of Time and all of that. But as someone who was just getting into fantasy, it worked for me and I enjoyed it. Coming in at number 16 is the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. I have read Outlander, and this is sitting at 25 million copies sold. Is this really fantasy though? I guess it does have a fantastical element, has a time travel element, but it's not like your traditional sword and sorcery fantasy. I did read Outlander and I actively disliked it. I disliked that book so much. I, to this day, cannot figure out how this series is so popular. I don't understand. I liked the historical aspects of it. I really liked the romance, but my God, the amount of sexual violence in this series, in this book, is insane. So I personally didn't connect with it because of that. So not going to continue with the Outlander series. Alrighty, coming in at number 15, we have The Wind in the Willows, 25 million copies sold. I have never read The Wind in the Willows. It's a children's book, that's all I know. Maybe I should. It's an oldie, published 1908. I don't know anything about it. You guys will have to let me know in the comments if you read The Wind in the Willows. Coming in at number 14 is Stephen King. It looks like The Dark Tower. Yeah, The Dark Tower series. 38 million copies sold. Okay, so I actually read The Gunslinger. This was the first and last Stephen King book I have ever read. And I picked it up, did not like it at all. And it has deterred me from wanting to pick up any other Stephen King books. I just thought it was weird. I didn't like the character. I didn't like the writing. I just did not like The Gunslinger. And I had just read that this was such a iconic, famous fantasy series that I was really excited to get into it. Stephen King is, you know, so famous, but just wasn't for me. Alrighty, number 13, it looks like Eragon. All right, we have The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini at 33 million copies sold. I have read Eragon. I did not finish the series. I was an adult when I read Eragon. And once again, this is another series that people say is just a copycat off of a bunch of other things. But I mean, at what point, all of these stories are just the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a plot archetype. You're going to see similarities if the author is using that archetype. Like, that is what makes up that archetype. You're going to have, you know, the chosen one. You're going to have the young boy from humble beginnings. You're going to have the mentor. You're going to have all of that. So I don't really think it was a copycat. I think he was just using the hero's journey. So The Inheritance Cycle, I don't know if I'll ever actually finish because I liked Eragon, but I didn't love it. So I might. I have all 4 books. I might eventually. And the movie, I've seen the movie. The movie was horrible. I would love if they redid the movie. All right, moving on to the next one. Looks like we have The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. And this is 36 million copies sold of the Shadowhunter Chronicles. Yes, I have read all 3 of her main series. There is another one that I haven't read. I haven't read all of like the, I guess, novellas and things that go with it, but I've read a lot of her books and I personally really like them. They got me back into reading when I was in my 20s, and I think they are a good place to start if you're trying to get into that type of fantasy, that urban fantasy with werewolves and vampires and fae and all of that. All right, the next one is Watership Down by, is it Richard Adams? Yeah. At 40 million copies sold. I have not read Watership Down, although I do own it. I picked it up at my used bookstore at some point. I don't really know what this is about. I know it's about a bunch of rabbits. That's all I know about. So maybe I'll get to it eventually. It's a classic. Number 10, it looks like we're coming up on Game of Thrones. Ooh, George R.R. Martin. Okay, 60 million copies sold. I read the first 2 books. I read A Game of Thrones, and I think A Feast for Crows is the second book. And I read these books when I was a senior in high school, I believe, so a long time ago. And I didn't want to continue the series. I remember finding that there were too many characters and it was hard for me to keep up with. I also didn't like the bleakness of the world. Every single character was horrible. All of them. There wasn't any one character that I wanted to root for, and George R.R. Martin has no problem with like killing off your favorite character in like a brutal, grotesque way, and just also the amount of sexual violence I wasn't a fan of. So I decided not to continue the series, and 20 years later, I still have no desire to pick up this series. So I'm good. All right, moving on to, looks like Discworld. All right, so we have Discworld by Terry Pratchett, 70 million copies. And I've heard that you are not supposed to start this series with, what is it, The Color of Magic, the first book in the series, because if you do, it'll put you off for like wanting to read the rest of the series, which, I mean, that's just weird to me that the first book of a series is not good. You don't start there, but, and Dom over at Dominish Books, probably a couple years ago, sent me Guards to get into reading Terry Pratchett, and I still haven't read it. So it's a series I will get to eventually. I just am in the middle of so many others that I need to finish first. So you guys will have to let me know if you've read Terry Pratchett and if Guards is the right book to start with. Coming in at number 8, looks like Wheel of Time. Let's see how many copies sold by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. 80 million copies. Oof. Okay, so I have read all the way through Lord of Chaos. And I have been on the fence about if I even want to finish this series. It's just so sloggy. It's so sloggy. And I personally do not like any of the female characters in this series. I've said this before. They are abusive to the men. They are mean, and the men just like accept it. And if you had a book series where the men were treating the women the way that the women are treating the men in this book, like everyone would be up in arms, like, oh my gosh, abuse, abuse. But because it's women doing it to men, like it's okay. I just, and they're all the same. All the women are the same. They're all the same. I don't know. Like, this is another one I might finish eventually. I'm just not in any rush. At number 7 looks like Anne Rice, The Vampire Chronicles. And that has sold 88 million copies. So Interview with the Vampire is one of my favorite books of all time. However, The Vampire Lestat, the second book, I have attempted to read 2 times and I put it down both times. However, the second time I did get through more of it than I did the other times. So I will finish it eventually. It's just a heavy book. It's a heavy book. It's a depressing book. There are a lot of weird sexual undertones in Anne Rice's work. Just putting that out there. But I do want to finish it. I loved Interview with the Vampire. Alrighty, coming in at number 6 is Twilight by Stephenie Meyer, 100 million copies. I've read it. I liked it. Always going to have a soft place in my heart for Twilight. Number 5, The Chronicles of Narnia. I actually have not read The Chronicles of Narnia. Over 100 million copies sold. I do own the entire collection in a single book, and it is a series that I do want to read eventually. Just haven't gotten to it. Coming in at number 4, The Little Prince. This is a classic. Oof. This is like a magical realism type story. I've never read it. I think it was translated too. 140 million copies sold. Maybe I should read it. Number 3, we have The Hobbit, one of my favorites of all time. And ironically, I've never actually reviewed The Hobbit on my channel. So you guys will have to let me know if you want me to do a review for The Hobbit. I used to read this book with my 7th graders before like our curriculum changed. And yeah, it's just one of my favorites. I love Bilbo so much. I love the world that Tolkien created so much. So yeah, let me know if you want me to do a review for The Hobbit. And that's at 142 million copies sold. All right, and then we have The Lord of the Rings. That would make sense. All right, The Lord of the Rings, we've sold 150 million copies. I talked before about how Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings trilogy was one of the first series to get me into reading fantasy, so that's another series that I will always love and has that special place in my heart, and I could reread over and over. And moving into number 1, I feel like all of us can guess what number 1 is going to be. We have Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling, and this is, oh my god, 500 million copies, my goodness. So yes, I have read all the Harry Potters and only Harry Potter. I haven't read any of the, like The Cursed Child or anything like that. I've only read the original Harry Potter books, and this is another one that got me into reading when I was in middle school, and I've seen all the movies. I've been to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter more than once. I love it so much. It is just a phenomenal, magical series that brings me back to my childhood. So definitely, I can believe that that is the number 1 best-selling fantasy series of all time. All right, you guys, that is the top 20 best-selling fantasy books of all time and which ones I have read and not read and my thoughts about them. Do you think that this list is indicative of a well-rounded, seasoned fantasy reader? You guys will have to let me know in the comments, and you guys will also have to let me know which one of these books you have read and which ones you haven't. So thank y'all so much for watching, and I will see you in another video soon. Goodbye.